about quite a big subject, the subject of emotion, the 4 different types or the 4 different styles of attachment. The positive one, which is a securely attached person. And the next category is a person who's categorized as having what's called an avoidant or insecure attachment style. The next one we want to look at is an ambivalent attachment style. Persons with disorganized attachment tend to change rapidly. We've gone through the 4 attachment styles and what they look like, and by no means is this designed or is this aimed to have any parent sit and think, oh my goodness, I'm a terrible parent, I'm not doing these things down to a T. I just want to come back and say that there is only one perfect parent, and each one of us as parents fall again somewhere in that continuum. And there aren't any human beings out there that have completely perfect, secure, 100% of the time parents and secure attachment 100% of the time. But secure attachment in and of itself is achieved and happens over a long period of time, over the first 5 and moves into 10 years of a child's life. So it's really the sum of those years. It's not a single event. It's not where a parent can stop and say, you know, when my son was crying today, I told him to stop crying, and that was me suppressing my emotions. And then I don't take into account the other 100 times when I've gone down to his level and I've said, tell me what you're upset about, let's talk about it, how about we try this, how about we try that. And most parents do that. They get to points in time where they stop and they need to put boundaries and they put limits and they say, you need to stop crying or you need to behave in a different way. But the insecure attachment styles is where that is the case 100% of the time. But for most parents, that's not the case 100% of the time. For most parents, that happens occasionally, and the majority of the time, they try to understand the underlying fears and feelings the child is going through. So I don't want for any parent to be sitting here and going, oh my goodness, I'm a terrible parent. I can tick every box in this ambivalent, or I can tick every box in this avoidant. Because I think if you took a closer look at your relationship with your children over a long period of time, you'll probably find that that's not the case. And the good thing about attachment and the good thing about attachment theory is it doesn't end in childhood. The basis occurs in childhood, but a counselling relationship then can be a relationship where a person learns secure attachment. And when I say a counselling relationship, I don't necessarily mean a formal counselling relationship in a counsellor's office. You know, ideally that's the case, but that doesn't always have to be the case. When a person enters into a relationship with a secure person who's able to help that person who's insecure overcome their insecurities and empowers that person, they can overcome their insecure attachment style and form secure bonds and live a comfortable emotional life. But in a counselling relationship, it needs to be a stable, warm relationship with firm boundaries, handling of protests, reliability and emotional responsiveness that assists with affect regulation, all elements of a secure bond. In order for a counselling relationship to work, in order for a person to be able to overcome their ambivalent or avoidant or even their disorganized attachment styles and move closer to a secure attachment style, they need to form that relationship in a counselling or helping or in a relationship setting. Now, John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth are the 2 founders or the two principal parents of this attachment theory. And in Bowlby's own words, the role of the therapist or a counsellor is to provide a patient, that was called patient at those times, with a secure base from which he can explore the various unhappy, painful aspects of his life, past and present, in a way that will not be possible without the support of the counsellor in a therapeutic alliance. So what that's saying by the founder of attachment theory is, in a therapeutic relationship, in a relationship which brings about healing and restoration of attachment, that relationship needs to be one where there is a secure bond, where that person can feel free to express their emotions and those emotions will be received in a healthy way by the person that they're dealing with, which takes us back to empathy. which takes us back to unconditional positive regard. And that's why all these things are related, because unless the person can sit there and accept and hold and walk through another person's emotions, then they're not able to form that secure bond, that base from which that person can then start to explore their life. And in a Christian counselling relationship, then the opportunity exists to help the client form a secure attachment with the perfect parent. But it's really important, it's so important, I can't stress this enough, that we realise and understand where a person's views of their relationship with God come from. And a person's views of their relationship with God primarily come from their relationship with their parents. And it's not actually the primary caregiver, who's usually the mother, it's actually the father. Most people learn about their relationship with God from, because of the metaphors, because of how we speak about God, how He is the Father and He is our Father. A person's relationship with their father forms a parallel, direct relationship with how they view their relationship with God. So if a person has a father who abandoned them at a young age, or abandoned them either emotionally or physically, there is this underlying belief that God abandons me in time of need. Because as a child, I had need and my father wasn't there, therefore in my time of need, God will abandon me. If they have a relationship with their father where it's a secure, loving, healthy, level relationship where they can talk to him about anything, they can have fun with him, they can engage with him, then they're far more likely to see God as being approachable and someone they can talk to and they can turn to in time of need. If they had a father who said to them that you're only going to receive my love and my praise and my affirmation when you do the right thing, they will believe in a God of scales. They will believe in a God who praises them and loves them when they do the right thing, when they don't sin, but when they're a sinner, they're evil and they're horrible, and God just walks away from them and wants to have no part of them. And that's critical to understand, because when we're trying to help a person reform their attachment style and look at what they view themselves and how they view themselves and how they view others, and we want to start to introduce the idea of God as a perfect parent and God as a parent who can compensate for the insecurities that they may have felt in their early childhood, in their original attachment style, then we must first deal with how they view their parents. We must first be able to see the parallels and help the person question their beliefs about God. And I'm not talking theological beliefs, I'm talking about internal beliefs. I'm talking what they really feel about God, what they really believe God is, and who He is in their life. So we have to tread very, very gently in this area. But having said that, having kept that in mind, that we need to tread gently, it is the one area where a person can then start to have a secure, healthy relationship with God, and they can start to see that it's okay for me to express emotion, that He receives that openly and comfortably, that He Himself expressed emotion. He wept, He was angry, He expressed a myriad of emotions, and there's no shame in the Bible in sharing those emotions with us. We can then start to introduce to the person who may be having an attachment style where they're fearful of showing emotions, that it's okay to show emotions, and provide a safe haven for them to show those emotions. And for the person who takes situations and maybe dwells on the negatives, we can then start to give them a different perspective of maybe how God sees things and how God sees them as a person who is capable, who is able, who can do all things through Christ who strengthens them. But again, we have to tread gently and we have to be very cautious how we do that. And in order to effectively counsel a person through their emotions, we also need to have a clear understanding of what emotions are. And even though there are many definitions out there, and I could have filled your pages with definition after definition of what emotions are, I think the simplest and the clearest definition of emotion is that it is information. It is information about what is happening for a person, about their beliefs. And it's about a person's core beliefs. There are times when clients need to feel, to be with, to express and experience their powerful emotions. And A counsellor who's aware of the power of strong emotions will utilize these times to promote and initiate deep and profound change within the lives of clients. So there's two kinds of change. There's one level of change where I say to you, okay, you're a parent, in order to discipline your child, you need to do A, B, C, and that's the best way of disciplining your child, right? So you go away, you learn a behaviour, and you do it. And it's simple. You can do it repetitively for a very long period of time. That's one level of change. There's another level of change where you feel so intensely about something, and you stay with that feeling and you talk through it and you process it, and you get to a point where you realise, oh my, I've been thinking about this in this way for so long, but I think if I dealt with it in that way, it would be completely different. And that's a far more powerful change than a behavioural change, because that is a change that comes from within a person. That's a change that comes from dealing with a pain that they probably previously hadn't been dealt with. If a person has an avoidant or ambivalent attachment style, what happens? And it's interesting that you asked that, because I just read an article because I was thinking the same thing. And initially people thought that you must have a secure attachment style in order to be able to counsel others. But what was found is people who had an avoidant or ambivalent attachment style and have been able to work through it and have been able to process it and have been able to come to terms with that stage of their life had far more empathy and have far more compassionate understanding for clients than those who had a secure base from which to explore the world, because they could easily go back and see things from another person's point of view. Whereas, so I'm not saying it's impossible, but it was slightly more difficult. So the majority of effective counsellors, the majority of counsellors that have worked successfully with others, are those who actually come from an ambivalent or avoidant attachment style. So the last thing we want to talk about, and you'll see from your notes, the last 2 pages are a list, right? Are a massive list of feelings. I remember in our marriage seminars or in our relationship seminars, I can't remember the numbers now, so Sonia might, but we know something like 50,000 words, and we only use about 11,000 of them in day-to-day speech, or thereabouts. I can't remember the numbers, but I can pull them up for you. So these are some of the words that are emotive words. These are a lot of the words that people may not think about when they think of emotions. You know, we think happy, sad, angry, unhappy, blue, you know, miserable, but there's a far bigger kaleidoscope of emotions than we may think. But emotions come down to two important kinds of emotions, and they're primary and secondary. Attachment theory looks at emotions as built-in responses that help us achieve a sense of closeness to our attachment figures. So if you think of it in the sense of a child, it views emotions as built-in responses. So when a child's primary caregiver, when their mother walks away and leaves them, they cry and they're sad and they're doing everything in their power and screaming at the top of their lungs to get their attachment figure to come back and be in their presence. Now I'm talking about young children. And the same then applies throughout life. Emotions are generally things that we do to attract something back, to get something, to achieve a sense of closeness to someone. And I'm talking about intense emotions here, right? And that's how attachment theory views it. But it's critical to see as well emotions as neither being right nor wrong. They're also a God-given action potentials that drive adaptive, productive behaviour. Emotions are something that were created in us to motivate us to do things. So you know how the Bible says, be angry and do not sin, for example. You know, when our Lord walked into the temple and it was a market, he was angry, but he did not sin. Right? The emotions can drive a person to do things. When we see injustice, we can be angry about it and we can take action, positive action, to repair the injustice. Or we can take negative action. But it's originally designed for it to drive adaptive and productive behaviour, not destructive behaviour. And emotions are also a rich source of meaning. They give us powerful, compelling feedback as to our environment, how our environment is affecting us, and the feedback regulates our responses and organises our behaviour. If I walk into a room and I see a particular scene in front of me, my emotional response to that scene in front of me tells me a lot about how I view the world. So if you walk into a room and you, for example, see a father picking up their child and playing and being cheerful and loving with that child, your response, your internal response, your feelings that come up as a result of that tell you a lot about how you view a father-son relationship. Whether I stand there and I look at that and I think, how unfair, I never had that. Or I think, wow, that's so wonderful, that's beautiful, that's so rich and loving, and that just makes me happy to see. Or whether I think, oh, this is just so fake. My response, what I think and how I feel, tell me a lot about how I perceive the world around me. And so some theorists believe that a person is really unable to make any decision in life without, at some point in the decision-making process, consulting their emotions. And you know how some people will do something and they'll say, it just feels right. You know, it feels like this is the right thing to do. Or I don't feel so good about this. Or this makes me feel sad. Or this makes me feel happy. And the idea is, if you really think about any decision that you make, your feelings play a role in that decision-making process. Whether the decision is as big as getting married to someone, or as having a child, to which university course you study. Regardless of the kind of decision or what you wear on a particular day. You know, no matter the size and the impact that decision is going to have, your emotions, your feelings tend to play a role. And so it's then important, if I'm going to help people, that I need to be comfortable with other people's emotions and start to see them as non-threatening to me. Their emotions are a powerful thing that tell me a lot about them. So I can then start to look at a person's emotions and say, okay, there are two kinds of emotions here. There are what's called primary emotions and secondary emotions. Primary emotions are those things that a person does initially. You know, they're the initial response, the fight or flight, the anger, the happiness, that initial first action. But that initial response, that initial feeling to any given situation, below it, beneath it, deeper in there, has an underlying secondary emotion, has something driving it, has a fear driving it, has a sense of security or a sense of insecurity driving it. And it's those emotions that a counsellor then needs to explore. And it's those emotions that a person then looks at, which takes us back to the cornerstone of counselling, which is basic and advanced empathy. This is all related. So I start to talk to a person through basic empathy, and I start to talk to the person with the emotions at hand, with how they react. And as we talk more through that, so when a person sits in my counselling room and tells me that they're so angry that they came to park, you know, they had their two kids in the back seat and they're standing there about to take this parking spot, and this other driver just cut them off, took the parent driving spot, the parking spot, and they don't even have a pram, they don't even have a child. It's so angry, it makes me so angry and so frustrated. And they're sitting there and they're telling me about how angry and how frustrated they are. And it's not just that I'm annoyed they took my parking spot so I had to find another one. No, they're genuinely angry. And the more I talk through that, the more we process that, something that seems so simple and happens on a day-to-day basis to so many people, the more we start to get to the belief that the world's unfair and no one really cares about me and I'm not as important as anyone else. And I have this sense of loneliness, like it's me against the world. But there's no way that I could have gotten to that. I could have gotten to those secondary emotions unless I was able to hold and explore those really strong, really powerful primary emotions that the person was saying. And then once I get to those secondary emotions, once I then start to get to the idea that no one really cares about me, it's me against the world, and I can't trust anyone else to look after me, I can then start to talk to that belief. I can then start to say, well, where does that come from? How is it that I can be 26 and stand here and say that no one cares about me, and no one really loves me, and no one really wants to have anything to do with me? Where did that come from? At what point in my life did I start to believe that? And I start to put myself in that person's shoes. And they can then start to say, well, maybe it's because my mother never loved me, or didn't only said that she cared about me when this happened, or maybe it's because I was in this relationship and that happened, and then the whole history, helping the client tell their story, starts to come out. And something kind of strange and unexplainable starts to happen, especially in a Christian counselling setting where a counsellor is sitting there and continuously through all of this praying for their client, that as a person speaks and as the person starts to tell their story and as it all starts to unfold, they start to hear things for the first time and start to go, oh, that makes sense. I can start to put the pieces together. That's why I think that way. But that's not really the case. And the counsellor almost just sits back and lets the person process and lets the person talk through, and they walk away and they say, I don't really get how I got to the point where I don't think that way anymore, but somehow I did. And it's something counsellors say, you just trust the process. But it is very much about trusting that process. Trusting the fact that once we get to the secondary emotions, once we get to those underlying beliefs, then a person can then start to process them and start to question them and start to think through them and can then start to have significant, powerful change in their life, not just behavioural change in their life. And I guess with that brings us to pretty much the conclusion of emotions. But it's important, like I said, to note that emotions play a very powerful role in a counselling relationship. If a client senses that a counsellor fears emotions or is unable to handle emotions or brushes away emotions or just helps the person to feel better. If I sat down with that client who was so angry about her parking spot being taken and just said, oh, it's okay, but next time you'll find a better spot and it's no big deal, we would have never got to her underlying core beliefs that she doesn't believe that she's worthy or that she can trust others to care for her, or that anyone cares about her. If I just helped her feel better, then I would have never got to the underlying core issue. So counselling isn't always about helping someone feel better, it's about exploring what those emotions mean and where they're going to.